Hello everyone, my name is James Williams. I'm Director of Programs with an organisation called the Mobile Ecosystem Forum. We've been around for over 20 years. We are a neutral mobile industry trade organisation. We have now 170 members across what we call 6 ecosystems, like product areas, and our largest product area we talk about, or members talk about, is enterprise communications. In simple language, business messaging. Now, business messaging encompasses many, many channels. Indeed, so many of you will have heard conversations around the areas of omni-channel or CPaaS. You have heard of, obviously, in the past, multi-channel. There is then UCaaS, Unified Communications as a Service. Then there's CCaaS, Contact Center as a Service. There's so much. But at the end of the day, it's about enterprises getting their content to the end users and their clients. Now, all of us here, all of us listening, all of us watching are subscribers in one way, shape or form of mobile operators around the world. So really, ultimately, if you think about this, it's the mobile operators that ultimately own the mobile subscriber relationship. Now, SMS itself has been around almost 30 years. On December the 3rd this year, SMS will be celebrating its 30th birthday. But really, in the past 5 to 10 years, the whole area of what we call application to person SMS, so business to consumer, B2C, B2B SMS, has really grown and grown and grown. Several years ago, it was fairly easy to meet people who would say, "Ooh, SMS is on its way out, it's dying, there are plenty of other channels coming along, chat apps are going to replace it, you've got RCS is going to replace SMS." But definitely, as the last couple of years have shown, this is most definitely not the case. A2P SMS is growing. There is a great opportunity for mobile network operators around the world to have a really nice extra source of revenue and margin as well. And there are just opportunities everywhere. But at the same time, there are challenges. And a lot of challenges actually come from within the industry and from within the various levels and stakeholders involved. Now, joining me today to talk about the whole area of A2P SMS, and ultimately, it's all about ensuring that A2P SMS remains stable, the monetization of it is stable, and ultimately the money keeps flowing in a nice way that benefits all, is Ricardo Martins, who heads up messaging for iBasis. Ricardo, very warm welcome. Hi.
Hi, hello to everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to have this session with you, James, and the rest of the attendees.
Yeah, good to see you. So we've talked in person. Indeed, we actually spoke at an event, a MEF event, a business messaging event in Amsterdam in June. So lovely to have you back with us here on this show. Also joining me is someone who's very well known across the messaging community, and that's Giovanni Bernini from Global Telco Consult, GTC. Hi, Gio.
Hi, James. Thank you for having me on this panel.
No problem. So you've been in the world of messaging for a fairly long time, but you came via the area of physics, because I noted you studied physics in Bayreuth and indeed Manchester here in the UK. And now you've been in the world of messaging for many years. So yeah,
indeed. Yeah, now with GTC, we're trying to be kind of the independent advocate to make messaging better. And so we're helping the whole ecosystem, from enterprises to service providers to operators, to make a good living out of the messaging and create really value.
Exactly. So it's about that value, it's about sustaining that value. And it's always important to have a mobile network operator in the discussion. I'm pleased to say that we have one today, and that is NOS, Portugal. It was formerly known, many of you out there will probably have known it before a few years ago as our Optimus, but now NOS for a number of years. And we're joined by Jorge Vieira, who is head of all the operations covering wholesale. And that's quite a few, because they've got about 4.8 million mobile subscribers. They've got landline subscribers. They've got people, TV services and internet services. So you're a full quad play mobile operator. And a very warm welcome, Jorge. Hi.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for the invitation to join with all this team here. And yes, we are a Portuguese operator right now with television entertainment, because we also have cinemas in Portugal, and of course voice and SMS business. Right now we have we are one of the top Portuguese players, the top Portuguese operators.
Fantastic. So George, let me stay with you first, because I think it's a good idea to frame the opportunity and frame what we're talking about. I know this topic comes up a lot in discussions, and many of you watching this right now will have heard various statistics about the A2P SMS market, but it's great hearing it from a mobile operator themselves. So George, can you just tell us what it's been like the past couple of years in terms of your A2P SMS volumes? Have you seen an increase? Have they stabilized now? What's going on generally?
Yes, it's funny in the way, because based on the pandemic and this crisis that everybody suffer, we come back home, we start working from home, and we start using more VPNs. And in order to have the codes, the access codes to the VPNs, SMS A2P grow a lot the volumes, because normally the tokens that we receive in order to activate our VPN account, we receive through an SMS A2P. So the last 2 years, we saw a huge increase of the SMS A2P messaging. So for us, in our opinion, as a mobile operator, we start sending a lot SMS from our customers, retail customers and enterprise customers. We start sending a huge volume of outbound SMS, but at the same time, inbound SMS, several from national other carriers, national operators, but also from international carriers. We are seeing a lot of OTT SMS incoming to our networks. It's a way right now we are using a lot of SMS in order to validate accounts. We create a login in the one service, and normally we receive an SMS A2P in order to validate the access. So the SMS A2P grows a lot during the last 2 years.
Fantastic. That's really positive. And indeed, that's something I've heard from a lot of MEF members, other operators and players generally. Also, governments seem to be really using that. Have your Portuguese government been using SMS to communicate with your citizens as well? Have you seen an increase in that?
Yes, at the same time, yes, because right now we are receiving SMSs related to, imagine when we have a storm that approached to Portugal, we receive an SMS alerting that a storm is coming in. At the same time, during the summer in Portugal, we suffer a lot with fires, with forest fires. And we also receive an SMS alerting for that situation, and in order to avoid some critical areas. So also our government, it's using a lot the SMS A2P, as at the same time the commercial SMS, it's growing a lot. For example, we are hoping during November we will have the Friday. Black Friday, and for sure this type of actions will increase a lot the peak of SMS during a period. So right now we are seeing a huge use, a massive use of SMS A2P, not only for the government, but also for the companies and the business, in order to create some commercial actions.
Okay, that's great. So there's a huge variety of use cases. So this is obviously yourselves in Portugal, but this is something reflected around the world. Giovanni, you work You yourself and indeed your company work with a whole host of mobile operators, messaging aggregators, etc. around the world. Is George's experience in Portugal reflected in other parts of the world? Is the market strong, or are there challenges and threats facing the market?
So absolutely, the total numbers are growing up. So what we see in Portugal, I think, is reflected in all geographies. But having said that, it's not without threat. I think one of the main topics we want to discuss is what is the monetization strategy, which is keeping the momentum alive without killing it. And that's, I think, where I see the biggest threat right now. And I'm speaking to Facebook, to Google, who are the main consumers of SMS internationally, which is kind of an irony that for operating WhatsApp, you still need the old-fashioned SMS to get it instantiated and registered. So they have lots of A2P SMS volume, and they're clearly saying if this continues like they've been watching for the last couple of years, they will need to switch to different technology, different channel, because it's just becoming too cost prohibitive.
And indeed, I think it's one of the rare situations where you've got the likes of the so-called FANG, but it actually should be MANG now. So Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Google, and others are combining to try and find a way of providing this 2FA, which isn't SMS. So that's something which is there right now. Ricardo, Giovanni touched on an issue there with regards to the SMS side of things. George mentioned the international SMS. Can you just explain to the audience what's happening in terms of domestic SMS pricing, and then we have international SMS pricing? Is the pricing similar? What's going on around the world?
Yeah, I think that distinction is starting to happen with the operators starting their journey of monetization, because obviously the volumes of international originated traffic are different, and sometimes in the local ecosystems it's easier to start monetizing the international traffic, and the split of prices starts with the differentiating the price. So it depends still a lot on geography, and that's something we will try to address during this this panel.
Could you just explain, because there are going to be probably some people watching who are brand new to the topic, what do you mean by an international SMS?
So international SMS is an SMS originated by a brand or an enterprise or an entity which has a headquarters outside the country of the destination, or it has activities in more than one country. But let's say the generic definition is outside the home, with the headquarters outside the country. So, for instance, for the case of George, the messages, international messages to Portugal would be from a company which headquarters is outside Portugal.
Now, that definition alone creates issues, as all of us on this call know, and those of you listening who are experienced. There is no one single definition of what constitutes an international SMS, and even different operators in the same country can have different interpretations, and that in turn impacts the pricing at the end of the day, the commercial model. George, can you just explain to the audience your journey, your mobile operator's journey on this road to A2P SMS monetization? So for the audience out there, what we're talking about here is when a business to consumer SMS and A2P SMS comes into us, ensuring that the mobile operator gets their rightful, justful piece of the pie, and that the message is not just delivered and that they are not paid. So how long have you been monetizing your SMS traffic, and what was the journey and what prompted you to do so?
Yes, from our side, right, for us it's a journey, as you said, James. because we start right now creating some rules, and we will implement a SMS firewall in order to protect and to identify all SMS that we are receiving right now. Based on the type of SMS, because it's normal receiving SMS person to person in the A2P automation to person interconnection, or vice versa, receive SMS A2P in the P2P interconnection. So what we will do, because it's also it's still in project and we will working in the first quarter of 2023, we will set up a SMS firewall in order to identify all the origins of the SMS that we are receiving. Also at the same time, trying to create some boundaries in order to not receiving fraudulent SMS like smishing or malware, because it's a problem that we have in Portugal, and I think it's the same in the other countries. It's normal some customers of us receiving SMS with a new URL link, and they click in the link and they install a malware in the mobile phone. So we are set up some rules in order to protect our customers and to protect our revenue. With those rules, it's our estimation to increase the volume of SMS A2P that we should rate an invoice. And based on that, we will try to monetize also that amount of SMS in the future, putting some price higher and differentiated from national or national SMS or international SMS. Okay, but in our opinion, will not be disruptive, neither aggressive. Will follow the trends of the market, especially the European community carriers, that because we don't want to kill this service. We don't want
Portugal
to kill
is still
SMS,
a cheap country, right?
Perfect. Yeah. Yeah. Can you just for the audience out there, how much is an A2P SMS in Portugal today? George or Gio or someone to tell us.
It's not more or less 1 cent per euro. Okay.
So
the termination of A2P. Yes, in commercial numbers, it's 1 cent per euro. The termination of SMS A2P in Portugal.
Okay. So that is a very, very, like you just mentioned there, it is a very, very reasonable price. And if you compare it with other countries, so for example, Germany, you're looking at close to 6 euro cents, so yes. 6 times more. So different markets are doing different things and different pricing structures. Now, Giovanni, you've worked with a number of operators. You've helped a number of operators on this journey, as we talked about. How would you go about recommending they structure their commercial model for A2P SMS? Where do you start?
So I think it's worth explaining how the reality is in many countries or many networks today, where we're not talking about 1 cent, we're not even talking about 6 cents. There's a trend to go 10 cents and above. Why is that? Well, it's kind of tempting to do easy money. If you're used to 2 cents and suddenly you raise it to 10 cents, it's 5 times the revenue, which is at the same time actually margin, because the operator doesn't have real monetary cost behind that. However, that is a very short-term way of thinking it, because as I laid out, it might actually kill the volumes. So, and the other aspect, it's not always the operator who is raising these prices to, immense heights. We see a trend that specifically like in Middle East, Africa, and Asia, there's a trend to give that monetization aspect to a third party. And that third party, which is a service provider, puts in the firewall, so there's investment from that third party, which makes life quite easy for the operator. And they obviously need to do a bit of money themselves. However, then they are kind of the exclusive gatekeeper for this network, and that's raising the temptation to go from 10 cents to 20 cents. And what sounds like ludicrous, 20 cents for an SMS, which, as we hear, costs 1 cent in Portugal and even less than half a cent in the US. But it's unfortunately happening, and that's exactly that element that puts off these big senders, like from the FANG community, and really risks the mid to long term viability of this business. So you asked me what is the one of the proposals? How do we recommend doing it? So we just had a project in the Middle East with one operator, and they were not even aware of the market price. They were happy instead of getting 2 cents to get 6 cents per SMS, and they thought the market price will be somewhere below 10 cents, right? So there's still a very healthy margin of a few cents for the exclusive gatekeeper. It turns out the price is at 17 cents. So the margin distribution between the operator and the service provider monetizing this whole thing was off, and the operator didn't know about it. So based on that experience, our recommendation was in the next contract, put in a veto right or a mechanism that allows you to limit the maximum market price. And that's, I think, a new mechanism which most operators haven't thought of yet, because in the end, they are the ones to stay long-term in their own market. So it's in their interest to not destroy the market for short-term gains.
Now, thank you, Gio. Now, Ricardo, I'm sure, well, I know you have seen it. I have definitely seen it, and I've been that close to a couple of operators. And indeed, there was life for me before MEF, Gio, and I did a very, very similar thing to what you're doing and helped mobile operators on the journey. And I was always cautioning them to not go for deals where essentially they come out and ask for the largest amount of prepaid money in advance from the vendor. Ricardo, are you seeing deals such as that? So the mobile operator saying, okay, whoever pays us the most money in advance gets that monetization business, gets that monetization deal. Is that still happening? And if you are part of that, how do you go about educating a mobile operator who the light bulb goes on and sees there's this fantastic opportunity for nice margin, but actually cautioning them to cautioning them to set the A2P price at a more reasonable rate, shall we say? How do you go about doing that?
Well, I think at the end, it's let's say that's a way to monetize, right? And I think one of the things the MNOs, and I think the title is of this webinar is how to have a sustainable monetization project. And what we see on the market is that different actors, different players in this ecosystem, aggregators, MNOs, they have different models, and yes, we see on the market some MNOs, having what we call short-term monetization projects where they focus on the revenue side, on the commitments, and they pass let's say the burden of reaching that commitment to the aggregators, and then create these disruption mechanisms or these distortions, as Giovanni was mentioning. So, but that's why we recommend that the operators have a a long-term strategy and a monetization strategy, because the actual commercial model is just one of the tools of one of the building blocks of the monetization strategy. We passed from a situation where the operators were not aware of the potential of SMS. So SMS was a service that started to be monetized on the late stage. First was roaming, voice, data, and SMS starts recently, relatively late. And in a certain way, OTTs, brands, aggregators were exploiting the network of the operators. So the first building block is actually protecting the network and being aware that there was bypass, there was gray routing, and that there was a lack of monetization. So we, of course, think that there should be an awareness so that the operators do a monetization, they protect their network, and that is kind of one of the first building blocks to do the monetization. But at the same time, we should not go to the other extreme. Just because the network is protected and the MNO is the owner of the end user and the owner controls the access to the end user, we should not go to the other extreme where we put SMSs at 20 cents, because then the alternative channels, the alternative ways to use to reach end users starts to be in practice. So I think definitely creating a situation where either the MNO or by lack of knowledge, lack of education, or short-term revenue incentive creates a situation that puts the price on the market very high, on the long term will have an effect, because again, the brands use this channel to communicate with end users. The value for money of an SMS versus email or versus other channels as a price. We can debate what is the level of that price. I'm convinced, or we are convinced, that is for sure not 20 cents. For sure is not 1 cent. There is a room in the middle, and we should find the optimum price for the ecosystem. I think probably a few years ago, we had the optimum price for the brands, which was zero almost. And we cannot have the optimum price for the MNOs or for the aggregators. It has to be for the ecosystem. And that's for us. It's also another important point is that the MNOs are aware of the type of traffic that they carry and that distribute on their network.
That's the key thing. It's that visibility. And you mentioned the R word during your point just now, the roaming word. Indeed, we've got a question. It's really not so much a question, it's more a statement, if you can see, from one of the people listening on the webinar, and saying the reason today is that operator roaming revenue declined sharply. And of course, that's the case. So, George, I know you clearly are going to be active in the wider mobile operator community. You're going to be part of the GSMA. I'm sure you will attend the GSMA WAS meetings and you'll talk to various other mobile operator colleagues around the world. Have you seen or have you heard around the world generally, because there was this massive drop, obviously, in roaming revenue because people couldn't travel, so that's a decent chunk of revenue gone, that really encouraged them to move faster into the world of monetizing A2P SMS if they weren't doing it, or to increase their price if they already were doing it. What have you seen from your interactions with the market?
Yes, in our opinion, of course, the roaming revenues are dropping a lot, especially in Europe, because right now the rates that we apply between the roamers in our network or our customers in roamers in the other network is they are so low that the revenues of roaming is dropping a lot. So we are trying to find different solutions and different approach in order to stop this decreasing of revenue. But we are also talking a lot between the operators about Volt, and Volt could be
so you're talking about VoLTE, voice over long-term evolution.
Yes, VoLTE, yes, and
5G roaming, yeah.
Yes, 5G roaming, and also with VoLTE, we are not in the scenarios that we are discussing. We are not seeing an increase of revenues, so we are facing a problem for us, because our operational costs is still growing and is still higher because the 5G's networks and all that we need to invest in order to set up the 5G's networks. But our revenue, they are not increasing, so it's a problem.
Okay, so there's a lot of pressure out there on operators, yes. People in your position who are managing wholesale operations. The roaming revenue has gone so much in Europe, obviously, we're talking about many other parts of the world. So there's real pressure on them to find suddenly revenue and margin from other areas. And that's, yes. Yeah. So that's real.
So one of the reasons that we try to start monetizing the A2P SMS is it's because we need to have additional revenues. We don't want to kill this SMS growing trend. We don't want to be aggressive in terms of modding the NOS price point, but for sure we need to monetize this trend of growing the SMS traffic and increase our revenues, because again our operational costs, they are increasing at the same time.
Okay, thank you very much, George. Now we've received another question as well, which is some more questions. Keep the questions coming, folks, please, because this interaction is really, really good, and we've got some real experts here. We've got a question here. So can telcos focus on partnering with pure play SMS firewall technology vendors, keep a check on the prices for A2P SMS? So I can translate that into simpler language for the audience and possibly for other people here. So Giovanni, let's talk about this. So the key element, technology element, in order to first of all gain that visibility and then ultimately to protect the network, is an SMS firewall.
Correct.
Who is selling these firewalls? Because you can see from the question here, we've got the pure play, and then who else are selling the firewalls? So essentially we've got two main camps here. What are they?
I mean, you have companies who focused on creating equipment for mobile operators, and specifically then firewall equipment, and they are primarily selling this as a software or as a equipment, some license basis. However, recently we saw a trend that SMS aggregators were buying up these specialized companies, and so with Arnam Infobip being a very prominent example, but there are many more. And so suddenly the operator who had bought an independent firewall was not so much independent anymore, because at the same time an aggregator was behind the firewall technology. So it's a decision by the operator what they prefer. And clearly an independent solution might have advantages, but some operators, on the other hand, they want the full package anyway. So they want to outsource everything, like a carefree lunch, and then there's, I guess, no problem having it being in the same hand. Actually, the advantage there is that you don't have to pay multiple people in the end.
Giovanni, allow me to step in on that.
No, please, I was going to come to you about this.
It's a very interesting point, because we think at Databases that the key is alignment of interest, right? Mm-hmm. If the interests are aligned and we are in a win-win situation, then we are all focused on the same objective, which is to maximize the volume terminated into the network and the volume monetized. Of course, when you put a very high commitment, which is not realistic, you create some sort of disalignment. But the model we envisage is, just installing a firewall and managing a firewall on the technical point of view. That's not monetization. 2 days after the firewall is installed is no longer up to date. You need to enrich that firewall with the proper managed services, and that managed services as a component of the technical capability, but also market knowledge, information, knowing what's happening, knowing the brands, knowing the source of the traffic, knowing the aggregation market, and that ties in with the alignment of interests. If there is a true alignment in a partnership model, revenue share model between the provider, like in this case, like Ibasis, and the MNO, that brings that intelligence from the market, which is something that the MNOs, even if they are brilliant on the technical standpoint, by the nature of the local market, they don't have that intelligence. So that's the added value we think that we can bring, joining the aggregator market with the technology of the firewall vendor, but enriching it and make it more efficient and more valuable at the end. Because the secret is how to keep the firewall effective, right? Because we know the fraudsters, they're always one step ahead. So, and this is the cat and the mouse game. But we think this model can have virtues, and that's what we let's say, with partners like NOS, where we engage with the MNOs and we try to create a win-win situation for the ecosystem at the end and for the MNO.
Exactly. Can I go to George? Clearly, you've got that partnership now with Ricardo here and Ibasis. How long did it take you internally within your organization to make that decision that we either go for a pure play SMS firewall vendor who offers the managed service, but then we've got to look for aggregator partners to manage all the traffic coming in, or you go to an organization that can do everything in a one-stop shop? Was that a fairly rapid decision for you, or was there quite some considerable discussion?
No, it was not a quick decision, because not related to the interest. Of course, since the first day that I would like to have a firewall, because with a firewall I have a lot of information and I have a support, as Ricardo explained, because it's not only having a firewall that looks for the traffic. It's necessary experience, knowing the business rules. So it's something that a partner can easily add to us and improve our experience. But internally in NOS, in the case of NOS, at the same time that we would like to have the firewall, we are migrating the old SMS platform, and it's taking more time than expected. So we have a delay of the implementation of the firewall. It should be happen 1 year ago, more or less, and it will only happen. We hope that it will only happen in the first quarter of 2023. So it was not a quick and easy decision, not because of the interest, but because of the technical issues in order to set up and deploy the solution from our side, because we need to to set up the new SMS solution to the platform that is not working yet.
No, because you need to audit all your existing SMS links. You need to make sure everything coming on signaling system number 7, SS7, and indeed on SMPP links is visible as well. So that audit alone, because it does bear witness. This bears witness to the benefits of a cautious approach, because if you're going to go live when you've got absolutely everything sorted, and then you know you're there. Because
it's iterative.
Go on, Gio.
It's iterative. You can't wait until everything is perfect to start. I think it's better to start and then accept a few holes and then find these holes and tap them.
Okay.
Because there will be always new holes popping up. It's this cat and mouse game which Ricardo referenced. The ingenious fraudster is endless in terms of its energy and creativity, and therefore you have to constantly check and test. So one other advice we can give operators is to have network penetration tests applied to their own network. Like in the IP world, where you have you hire hackers to see how secure your data center is. The same approach should be applicable for SMS. And we at GTC, that's one of our services for the operators. We try to test all possible routes like a shotgun, and see which one of the bullets comes through, and then we can indicate to the operator that's the hole which you still need to tap.
Fantastic. Ricardo.
No, and related to that, I think the point also mentioned by George is the information. And coming back, to the building blocks of a successful strategy, one is, of course, you need to have the network protected, but then you need to have information. And once you know the profile of the traffic, if you get OTP traffic, if you get marketing traffic, if it's local, if it's international, all this information, then you can tailor-made a pricing strategy. And that's something, looking at the evolution of the market. So now most of the MNOs, they have one price of termination. Eventually with some special promotions for specific sender IDs. But we think that the future, backed with the power of the analytics that the tools available today enable, we can move towards a use case pricing rather than a single price of termination. And that's probably going to help to find that optimum level of monetization, because maybe the price that a bank is willing to pay for an OTP is different from the price that a marketing campaign, a brand, Nespresso or whatever brand is willing to pay. So this sensitivity analysis, we think that it's one of the paths that the MNOs as an industry should explore.
Yeah, I think there is absolutely scope in certain markets down the line to explore those different commercial models with viewing different types of traffic in a different way from a pricing perspective. But I think what we're seeing here is certainly when an operator like Nosh here is starting out on the journey, I think it's simplicity is important, and the market needs to understand. And like you said, George, you don't want to come out and disrupt anything too much. You don't want to destabilize. It needs to be simple, but it needs to be fair to all parties. Yeah.
Yes, correct, James. Well, in our opinion, we don't want to be aggressive in terms of modeling our price points. So we'll follow the market, the benchmark of the European termination rates for A2P. We'll be followers.
Perfect. Okay. Thanks for that. Now, we've seen many questions. There's an anonymous attendee who is asking the difficult, but I would also say fun questions, but we will come to some of those. But there's a very good point here. So, Gio, you've worked, and Ricardo as well, and other people on listening as well, will have worked with a number of mobile operators and other parties over a number of years on this exact A2PS monetization. Now, there's some mobile operators that have been on this monetization journey for quite a long time, and they've gone beyond just wholesale now into enterprise. And that's indeed related to one of the questions we see here. And are we seeing a shift, a trend into mobile network operators cutting the amount of aggregators they're dealing with, because they're actually moving into the enterprise business themselves. Gio, is that a trend you're seeing?
Absolutely, and it starts with the group hubs. So what is a group hub? If you have a group of MNOs with different opcos in different countries, then the first step is always to centralize the SMS operation instead of every country doing its own and inventing the wheel over and over. Yeah, you put it into the group. Vodafone has done this many, many years ago, but many other MNO groups have followed. And once you have that, then it's a really attractive value proposition to go to Google and Facebook and offer like 15 different opcos for one connection at the direct price without any intermediary aggregator who is also charging a certain margin. So clearly a trend, and also maybe a trend to answer one of the questions about artificial inflated traffic. If you cut down the amount of middlemen, then you also reduce, you don't remove it, but you reduce the risk of someone in the middle benefiting from traffic which wouldn't be there if not done by a bot or something. And so that would be one measure to actually keep the industry healthy or healthier.
Perfect. Yeah, so that's a big topic, and we talked about a lot within the Mobile Ecosystem Forum and our Fraud and Revenue Insurance Group, actually artificially generated traffic. So yeah, that is talked about a lot. So thank you, Beatrice, for that question. We've got a comment here from Ruben Martinez. The long term depends upon the level of transparency between the firewall and monetization providers and the MNOs. I think that's a very, very good point. It's a comment, it's not a question from Ruben. A very, very good comment. So those of you watching can see his comment there. And it all comes down to the trust, and it's about having a great partner, the mobile network operator working with a very good, strong partner. And it's not about this short-termism. There is going to be this, let's say, there's going to be this pressure from parties, for perhaps for some people within a mobile network operator, like we've heard from George, mobile operators negatively impacted in terms of roaming revenues, but to have a knee-jerk reaction to suddenly come up with a way of increasing revenue overnight from other areas. But that is potentially dangerous and will impact the long-term sustainability of A2P. So Ruben, thank you for that comment. That was very, very nice indeed. Now, anonymous attendee here wrote this question: who is more to blame? Greedy, it's a tough one, greedy operators or greedy aggregators with exclusivity deals? The price of 10, 15 cents per SMS damages the whole SMS ecosystem. Who is it? Ricardo,
I think the key word is greedy. So whoever has that attitude is the one to blame. So we have multiple examples where the operators push the aggregators to that behavior. We have other examples. I think the example mentioned by Giovanni at the beginning, where the operator was not aware and is the aggregator doing that. So that's why we think that, you were mentioning that transparency and, once again, alignment of interest. Because if the commercial model that the aggregator, the firewall vendor, or the service provider put in place with the MNO is a win-win, transparent, has the same focus and the same drivers, then these type of issues will not occur.
So Ricardo, have you had to walk away from deals when, for example, a mobile network operator has come out and stated that they're wanting an unrealistic price given the state of the market, and it just and the economics just don't stack up?
Yeah, no, it's, let's say, sometimes it's the price, but also often the volume. The volume they ask as a commitment is a volume that does not exist, and it can be achieved only through artificial inflated traffic, and that's something that's not acceptable.
Or very high prices, or a combination of both.
Now, that's actually a good point about the volume, because the stage in a mobile operator going out, first of all, obviously you need to get visibility on what's traffic is coming through. But in many, many cases, obviously for security reasons and privacy reasons, a mobile network operator will not let a firewall vendor have unrestricted access to all, for example, the SMS data for 1 calendar month, or to the live platform. So in many ways, as a result, the firewall solution vendors, whether they are the standalone experts with a managed service, or they are the aggregators who offer that service as well inside, who are experts who've got that reach around the world, you're flying blind to a degree, because you don't actually know what the real traffic volume is. Or have things changed, Ricardo, and the operators you work with allow you to have access to a certain degree to the SMS traffic, so you're getting a real picture? Yeah,
let's say it really depends on the geography and of the regulatory situation in that market. I think traditionally, when you engage with the operator is willing to share all the information available. But if there is a regulatory constraint that does not allow certain activity, like blocking a SIM farm or to access content, this of course impacts the efficiency of the monetization, or the efficiency of the actions the MNO can take. Of course, in the other side, we see that, let's say, some operators that have a journey on monetization, and then they launch RFPs to stimulate a renewal of the deal, or a migration to another provider with better conditions. They maybe go stretching the conditions, and in that case maybe they don't share. But normally in the situation where the operator is willing to monetize, they will share the most information with either the firewall vendor or the aggregator, because they have an interest to increase the success of the monetization. And that of course is impacted by, as I said, by specific circumstances in the market, regulatory or interconnection or legal in the country.
Fantastic. You mentioned the other R word, regulatory, regulation, and unbelievably, we have that question right there. I don't know whether you saw that question and then answered with that, or it was just
no coincidence.
There we have coincidence. Very good. We've got this question from Nadia. How are regulations impacting the SMS ecosystem? Are they facilitating or making it more difficult? The perfect example from Ricardo there. In some situations, they're making it more difficult because of the regulations to get a real picture of what traffic there is within a mobile operator. And as a result, the end result is possibly, potentially an unrealistic price, because you're moving into an unknown and you've got the costs and you don't know. So there's that.
Let's say it's interesting question. And we always like to look at the bright side of the challenges, right? And we think, let's say, we are talking about monetization, but there is a very important side effect of implementing a monetization strategy, is that you secure the network, so you actually decrease the spam, decrease the smishing, mitigate the fraud. And that's a benefit for the end user, and that is actually helping a lot of MNOs to go to the regulator and, let's say, pitch the monetization speech not only as a revenue driver, but as well as an effective tool to protect the end users. Because if an SMS costs below 1 cent, you have fraud, you have phishing, you have all types of spam traffic.
Can I ask you, what's the market like? We've got George here. Obviously, we've got yourself. You're in Portugal as well. What's the market like in terms of the fraud, the smishing attempts going on in Portugal today? Are they around? Because of you've got, let's say, a higher caliber bad actor, because you've got some very sophisticated cybersecurity experts have come in to get into this smishing game. You've got a mixture of that, plus potentially the commercial model, the price makes it tempting as well. If you've got a mixture of that in Portugal today, what's the situation?
I can talk from our side. I don't have total amounts of the impact of this type of actions, but I can say that every week we have an attack with SMS. Or our customers receive an SMS with a link, with an URL link that they click and they install a malware in their equipments, or they start doing SMS for the international. But normally every week we have a lot of customers that suffering attacks. They have weak passwords in their systems, and they sending a lot of message to exotic destinations like Maldives, Iraq, New Caledonia, and so on. So it's something that happens every day. Every day we have an attack with fraudsters, with SMS to some exotic destinations.
Okay. And let's be very clear, if the regulator does not allow the carrier or the gatekeeper to look into the content of the message, you cannot stop this type of smishing, because the send ID can be manipulated. It looks like a bank. You need to look into the content. You need to be able to resolve the URL and check if it's a malicious domain behind that URL. And so it's a very clear answer to the regulatory question. The more the regulatory wants to protect the privacy, the worse it actually makes it.
Yeah, that kind of answers the last question we've got here from anonymous attendee about how easy is it, or can aggregators sort of exclusivity mask international A2P as domestic SMS, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, potentially you can absolutely do anything from a technology perspective. There is that potential, but of course it comes down to trust and working with a really, really good, solid, well-known vendor for those things. Okay, so that's great. So we're coming up to 5 minutes away from the end. I can't believe we've gone 55 minutes already. We need a little bit more topic. So for me, we're coming to the end, just summarizing. I think for me, what's been very impactful on this webinar is we've had George here from Nosh. We've had all the people in the chain involved, beginning to end, and Nosh are at the start of their journey. And George, I'd like to thank you for coming, because you've been very open and with where you as Nosh are, what work needs to be done, how you've gone through to make a decision on what strategy, and the fact that it's not something made overnight. It has taken a lot of time to get there, and I really appreciate that, because there are so many others around the world yet to go through this journey, and there are yet more who have gone through this journey and haven't been as transparent. So thank you very much for your transparency. That's been very refreshing. Ricardo, what would you say the market looks like in the coming year, 2 years for A2P SMS monetization? Are there still a lot of mobile network operators that have not started the journey, or they need to do a lot more?
Our view is that there is still a fair amount of operators that need to improve the efficiency of their monetization. So I think maybe 75% of the operators, they have some sort of tool in place, but that does not mean that we have a coverage of monetization strategies or projects. So I think there is a lot of growth to be captured, because we know the A2P market is growing. And I think in the 12 months, what we expect is to see a bit clarity on two different models. One short term that is on the market. We can see it every day, either aggregator driven, either MNO driven, and a more long term sustainable method or monetization model. And I think for the next 12 months, we expect these to be more clear, and if we can have if we can support MNOs and make the link between the MNOs and the sources of the traffic, we think that that sustainability and that long-term process will be more sticky, because SMS at the end, it's still the best channel to reach the end users. It's not the only one. There are other complementary channels for sure, but that there's ubiquity, reachability, security. There's so many positive attributes. So we think all the actors in the ecosystem will benefit if we do it on the right way and on a sustainable way.
Fantastic. Gio, would you concur?
Yeah, so I think it's about 10 years that the first monetization project started to pop up. I remember Grameen phone in Bangladesh, big news, $3.8 cents, and it was obviously some $0.01 before.
Yeah.
So and based on these early adopters of monetization, we're already seeing that there's a basically resupply or second or third round of monetization within the same operator. So they might have started with one solution, like an exclusive gatekeeper, and we see the evolution that more operators are taking it to a multi-vendor, multi-gatekeeper approach with a few trusted vendors, which keep the operator more in control.
Okay, thank you very much, Gio. So we really are about 1.5 minutes away from the end. So just to summarize, SMS is, put it this way, A2P, business to consumer, B2B SMS is not going anywhere. It's still here to stay. Volumes have increased in the past several years. Volumes will continue to increase for the coming years. There are challenges we've been hearing, particularly in the domain of two-factor authentication, and particularly those internationally originated SMS, and particularly into operators who might be charging a considerable amount. So therefore, that's raised the attention of the Metas, the Amazons, the Googles, etc. of the world to try and come up with an alternative solution. So there are threats to the world of SMS. But at the end of the day, my closing remark is, and it's something that you hear a lot, and a fact around the world is that there are over 300 million listed businesses around the world, and 95% of them do not even use SMS today to communicate with customers. So there's huge scope for growth. George, thank you so much to you and Nosh for joining. Ricardo, to you and the iBasis team for sponsoring this. And Giovanni, great seeing you again, and thanks for your expertise from GTC, and a pleasure, all of you, and thank you for all the questions. We weren't able to get through them all, but there will be plenty of opportunity in person with all of us, I'm sure, at future events. Thank you very much indeed, and have a good rest of the day wherever you may be. Bye.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you.